Aristos is the ancient Greek word for nobility, and it means superior or best. And this drive to prove one's superiority in all capacities through the pursuit of arete, that is excellence, was at the core of the ancient idea of heroism and virtue. The word aristocracy comes from the word aristos, literally aristos meaning the best and kratos meaning power. In aristocracy, the best, the most noble, the most beautiful, the most intelligent, the strongest hold power. But this ancient conception of aristocracy is nothing like the idea of meritocracy, which is thrown around on the right a lot. You hear people like Jordan Peterson talk about this. For me, meritocracy invokes a cheap kind of intelligence and industriousness, a one-dimensional schoolboy intelligence. The Greeks did not admire Achilles because he got good grades in school and knew how to follow the rules. They admired him because he was Dios, which in ancient Greek means godlike, or literally shining or brilliant. The Greeks admired Achilles because he shone with beauty, power, nobility, and a manifest superiority. He was a demigod. Physically and spiritually, he shared kinship with the gods. This is what gave him the right to rule. In ancient times, aristocracy was based upon the idea of divine descent and kinship with the gods. The idea that the nobility descended from the mythic heroes of the Bronze Age, and therefore from their divine parents. The Heraclids, for example, claimed the right to rule in Mycenae, Sparta, and Argos, tracing their ancestry back to Heracles and through him to Zeus. This idea of the divine right to rule continued into the Middle Ages, but in modernity, when discussing the idea of aristocracy and Aristos, I think we can replace the idea of the divine and the divine right to rule with the idea of nature. I think in a certain sense, the word nature for us is equally mythical as the idea of the divine and fulfills a similar role to the gods who are also forces of nature. We use the word nature to refer to so many different things, to the totality of existence and the forces which animate it, the laws of physics, but also to nature in the stricter sense of biological life, of plants and animals and people, and then of instinct, someone's inner nature, someone's inborn nature. We invoke nature in a similar way to which the ancients invoked the divine. For example, when we say, you can't change how nature made you. You're only 4 feet tall, but that's how nature made you, and nature is cruel and unfair. Or when we say someone won the genetic lottery, which of course isn't a lottery at all, we are invoking the idea of being blessed by genetics, being blessed by nature and biology. If you make the right choices, if you live correctly and with virtue in the ancient sense, nature will reward you with beauty, intelligence, strength, vitality, even with success and riches. And it is the same on a generational level and on a societal level. If you have a clean diet and avoid the toxins which are so prevalent in modernity, and craft yourself the body of a beautiful Bronze Age athlete, if you walked into Sparta, they might say, this man is blessed by the gods, surely he is the descendant of a demigod. But today, we might say, you are blessed by nature. Nature is rewarding you. That vital force which animates biological life, which is contained within you, is rewarding you for making the correct choices and for living virtuously. I have named this podcast the Aristos Podcast because I believe that this ancient concept best represents what we on the right, the true right, the ancient right, represent. The values of beauty, strength, intelligence, and human excellence. The value of quality over quantity, and the creation of higher forms. This is all contained within the ancient idea of aristocracy. The modern left has become a cult around the promotion of ugliness, weakness, and deformity, of sick life, of life bred from generations in the societal zoo which we have created. The modern left hates beauty, strength, and excellence because they make the inherent inequality of humans, the inherent inequality contained within nature and biology, plainly evident. Every once in a while you'll see an article pop up about how fitness is far right, or the admiration of beauty and strength is somehow inherently fascist. But from the ancient aristocratic perspective, the inequality inherent in nature and in humans is a good thing. And rather than seeking to level this inequality and drag everyone down to the lowest denominator, the doctrine of aristocracy says that we should promote the exceptions and hold them up as the ideals for all to strive for. The true meaning of aristocracy is the belief that the beautiful, the strong, the intelligent, those courageous and bold in action, noble and honorable in character, those lucky hits of the species, as Nietzsche called them, those blessed by the gods, as the ancients said, or blessed by nature, as we say, justify and elevate our species. All of this is contained within the word Aristos. Now that my intro ramble is over, I want to speak to you a bit about Homer, morality, and nature, using a short piece by Venner called The Homeric Triad. He writes, quote, "For the ancients, Homer was the beginning, the middle, and the end. A vision of the world and even a philosophy are implicitly contained in his poems. Heraclitus summarized his cosmic foundation with a well-turned phrase: the universe, the same for all beings, was not created by any god or by any man, but it always was, is, and will be eternally living fire." End quote. And by the way, you can find this piece for free online if you just look up Venner, the Homeric Triad. Venner is positing that the foundation of Homer's world is the ever-changing, cyclical world of nature, which is indifferent to human affairs. He elaborates on this idea in the first section of the piece, called Nature as the Foundation. Quote, "In nature, in its immanence, here and now, we find the answers to our anguish. Quote, as leaves are born, so are men. The wind scatters the leaves on the ground, but the forest is green again in the spring. So too with men. One generation is born as another is erased." The Iliad, Book 6. The wheel of the seasons and life, each transmitting something of itself to those who will follow, thus assures a measure of eternity. End quote. For the ancient Greeks, nature was indifferent to human affairs. Men are born and then tossed aside like leaves by the whims of nature and destiny. But also in nature we find a divine, enchanted world which answers our sorrows with the glimpses which it provides into eternity, into the secrets of nature and the divine. This is what I discussed in the second to last episode of the Bridges to the Superman series, in the Hymn to Demeter, which talks about the myth of Persephone in Dionysus, and then in the kind of paganized vision of Christ. So go watch that if you want to hear more about this. The next section of Venner's piece is called Excellence as the Goal, and here he discusses the idea of arete, of excellence, and the ancient Greek desire to be the best, and to leave behind a name which will echo through the ages, and thereby acquire undying immortal fame. I think this quote from the Havamal, a Norse text, perfectly illustrates the Greek view. Quote, "Cows die, kinsmen die, the self must also die, but I know one thing which never dies, the reputation of those who have died." End quote. For the ancient Greeks, this immortal fame, which is assured only through the memory of men, was their only chance at immortality, and it was more important to them than their lives, which come and go like leaves in the winds of time. But there is a caveat to this. The heroic desire to be the best comes with preconditions. It is not the desire to win at any cost or at the expense of one's dignity. The third and final section of Venner's piece is titled Beauty as the Horizon, and here he argues that to the Homeric hero, even dearer than immortal fame and being the best was living with honor. This is from a previous section, but it illustrates his point well. He writes, quote, "What does not pass away is interior, within oneself, in the truth of one's conscience, to have lived nobly, without baseness, to have remained in accord with the model one has set." End quote. As Venner points out in this final section, Homer's world is a tragic world. Characters are undone by their excess and their flaws. In fact, the greater the vitality and exceptional excellence of the character, the greater their flaw and excess, and the greater their undoing. This is why there are no happy ends for the great heroes of ancient Greece. In the final chapters of the Iliad, the closer Achilles ascends towards godhood, the more violent and inhuman he becomes, and the more he brings about his own undoing. It brings to mind Nietzsche's idea of going beyond, his encouragement of those who would pursue the Superman to embrace extremes and excess, to go under and over, as he says, and by this path to achieve greatness. Venner writes, "Homer's heroes are not models of perfection. They are prone to error and excess in proportion to their vitality. For this reason they fall under the blows of an immanent law that is the wellspring of Greek myth and tragedy. Every fault carries punishment, that of Agamemnon like that of Achilles. But for Homer, innocence can also be suddenly struck by fate, like Hector and so many others, because no one is safe from tragic destiny." This vision of life is foreign to the idea of a transcendent justice punishing evil or sin. In Homer, neither pleasure nor the taste for battle nor sexuality is ever likened to evil. End quote. In the face of the indifferent forces of nature, fate, and death, all that is left to a man is to act in a way which will be remembered, a way which will bring him glory and honor, and which will make his name echo through the ages. Quote, "The virtues praised by Homer are not moral, but aesthetic. He believes in the unity of the human being defined by his style and his acts. Thus men define themselves with reference to the beautiful and the ugly, the noble and the vile, not good or evil. Or to put it differently, the striving for the beautiful is the condition of the good. But beauty is nothing without loyalty or bravery. Thus Paris cannot be really beautiful because he is a coward. He is only a fop who deceives his brother Hector and even Helen, whom he seduced by magic. On the other hand, Nestor, in spite of his age, retains the beauty of his courage. A beautiful life, the ultimate goal of excellence in Greek philosophy, of which Homer was the paramount expression, supposes the worship of nature, the respect of modesty, Nausicaa or Penelope, the benevolence of the strong for the weak, except in combat, the contempt for baseness and ugliness, the admiration for the ill-fated hero." End quote. For the Greeks, beauty is the condition of the good. If one achieves power through deceit and wickedness rather than the merits of their own abilities, rather than through their manifest superiority, they have lost their nobility and honor. Better to die nobly than to live as a coward. And here we can see the reason for Achilles' famous choice. After Agamemnon takes Achilles' woman, Briseis, after Achilles' honor is slighted, he is disenchanted with the war. He decides to sail home and urges his friends to do the same. He scorns material wealth. He finds his life much more precious. And remember, this is after 10 years of sieging Troy. Achilles says, forget this, forget all this fighting for material goods. Achilles is a king after all, and has no need of material goods. What he is pursuing is honor, kleos, which means glory gained in battle, but this is denied him by Agamemnon. His honor has been taken away, and he has been forced to play second to the king. Therefore, he says, forget this whole glory thing. I'm going to sail home. But when his friend Patroclus is killed, avenging Patroclus's death is 1,000 times more important to Achilles than his own life. It's also interesting to keep in mind that when Hector killed Patroclus, Patroclus was wearing Achilles' armor, and thus Hector also slew the image of Achilles. He slew his pride, he slew his glory. So in avenging the death of his friend, Achilles is also redeeming his image and his glory. And thus we can see that while Achilles values his life more than material goods, what is most important to him is glory, honor, pride, kleos, the striving for arete, the drive to be the Aristos, the best, to live nobly, to live freely, to live with courage, and to have his name remembered. So far we have established that to the Homeric heroes, material wealth is of little meaning. It is simply an indicator of the kleos, the glory which one has gained in battle. What is most important to the heroic hero is to be the Aristos, to be the best, to strive to be superior to all other men. And yet it is important that this is done with nobility and with honor. And yet, to return to the beginning of Venner's piece, nature as the foundation, we see that it is always evident in Homer that these codes of morality, of virtue, these codes of conduct are external and constructed and imposed upon nature. They arise from the pact between men, which is in no way inherent to the world. Many times in the Iliad, warriors will refuse to fight each other because of pacts of friendship made by their ancestors, by their great-grandparents. A Greek warrior will recognize a helmet or a sash which his great-grandfather bestowed upon his Trojan opponent's great-grandfather, and so they'll stop the fight to converse and tell stories of their ancestors, and they will then refuse to fight each other. These incidents are pretty funny to read, and they reveal to us that the morality or codes of conduct at play here are based upon the bond of kinship and upon the host-guest relationship, upon the oaths of hospitality, and upon the bonds of blood and brotherhood. This is why genealogy has always been so important to the European tradition, and why even in the Middle Ages, as I talked about in my last video on the Trojan War, they traced their lineages back to the famous heroes of the Iliad. And yet, again, beneath all this, there's always that awareness that the codes of honor and kinship are imposed upon nature, not inherent to it. Beneath the laws of men, beneath the veneer of constructed society, the laws of nature are absolute, and they are indifferent to the affairs of man. When Achilles is in his divine rage, nourished by nectar and ambrosia, he completely tosses aside the laws of men. When one of the Trojans asks for mercy and says, "Please don't kill me, ransom me instead," Achilles says, "Nope, you're dead." He kills him and he says, "You're gonna have your grave in this river with the fishes. Your mother will never see your corpse again, and you will not receive a proper burial," which again was very important to the Greeks. And he says, "I'm going to slaughter my way all the way to Troy, hacking people down from behind." He has shed his humanity in this godlike state. As Nietzsche wrote, everything which is higher is also immoral. When Hector asks for mercy, Achilles says, "There can be no pacts between lions and men, and there can be no peace between wolves and sheep." Here Achilles is appealing to the absolute ruthless laws of nature which lie beneath the constructed laws of men. In this line, Achilles reveals the truth about nature in Homer. Nature has no mercy. Might makes right. Morality is imposed and constructed. This sentiment is echoed in the fragments which we have from the pre-Socratic philosopher Antiphon. In fragment 44, Antiphon says, quote, "Justice, then, is not to transgress that which is the law of the city in which one is a citizen. A man, therefore, can best conduct himself in harmony with justice if, when in the company of witnesses, he upholds the laws, and when alone, without witnesses, upholds the edicts of nature. For the edicts of the laws are imposed artificially, but those of nature are compulsory, and the edicts of the laws are arrived at by consent, not by natural growth, whereas those of nature are not a matter of consent." End quote. This is essentially what Achilles is saying to Hector in that famous line. The laws of men, the laws of mercy and of combat, are arrived at by the consent of men. They are imposed upon nature. But beneath those laws, the ruthless law of nature is absolute, and nature has no mercy. And Achilles has the ability to disregard the laws of men, which are artificially constructed. Throughout the Iliad, the scenes of violence are described with exquisite beauty and extended nature metaphors. These are actually some of the most beautiful parts of the Iliad to read. Some of the metaphors compare warriors defending the fallen corpses of their comrades to lionesses defending their cubs. On the battlefield, predators and prey struggle for survival and supremacy. The whole violent yet beautiful drama of nature is played out on the battlefield. Again, to return to Venner's analysis of Homer, nature, brutal and beautiful, is the foundation of this world. The immutable laws of nature are what are revealed when the veil of civilization is pulled back. So now we come to the question of what is reality on the most basic level, and the question of moral worldviews versus natural worldviews. In Christianity, the world is moral. You live within a fundamentally moral world. The metaphysics of the world are divided between good and evil. They are based upon morality. Whereas in Homer, this is not the case at all. Everything takes place within an amoral world, the world of nature, and good and evil exist, although not in the Christian sense, but morality and virtue exists within this amoral world. Our modern worldview in the West, the liberal worldview, as well as leftism, conservatism, etc., are all moral worldviews. Our modern worldview in the left, the liberal worldview, as well as leftism, conservatism, are all moral worldviews, and they are all based to some degree in Christianity, or at least heavily influenced by it. Even the most conservative Republicans, although they may aim to do it by economic means, aim at moral progress, the alleviation of suffering, the improvement and lengthening of life for mass man, the utopia which negates and levels the laws and inequalities of nature. Anyway, I talked about this at length in the final video in the Bridges to the Superman series, but I think it is important that you understand that everything we discuss today in politics and philosophy is based in a moral and progressive worldview. No one questions the fundamental goal of a utopia which alleviates suffering and levels the hierarchies of nature. Conservatism is based upon liberal Enlightenment values, and so is the liberalism of the establishment left in America and Europe. Leftism is based in Marxism, but Marxism, although it is anti-Christian, is a related ideology, at least to early Christianity, and it aims at utopia, the comfort of the masses, the leveling of nature's hierarchies, etc., etc. But no one on the right or the left questions whether this is a worthy goal in the first place. No one brings in the question of quality. They assume, as Christianity does, that mere life, mere existence has value. Yet in Achilles' choice of a short life of glory over a long domestic life of comfort, we see a refutation to this claim. And we have to understand what Achilles is really sacrificing here. Achilles would have been around the age of 20, give or take, when he set sail for Troy, so after the 10-year-long war, he would be in his late 20s or early 30s. By choosing to avenge Patroclus, Achilles gives up the possibility of ever seeing his home again, of ever seeing his father again, of ruling as a king for many long years, of enjoying the wealth and glory which he acquired at Troy, of having children, of having many more adventures and battles. Achilles is giving all of this up to live with nobility. He values the quality and character of his life above all else. Achilles' choice, which stands at the very center and the very foundation of ancient Greek civilization, and therefore of Western civilization, perfectly encapsulates and illustrates the path of higher life, of aristocratic life, which chooses to seek excellence and quality above all else, with, as Venner said, beauty, and I might add freedom and courage and nobility as the condition of this excellence. This worldview is unrelenting in its pursuit of higher ideals, its desire to be filled with beauty, power, and splendor, to be shining and brilliant like the gods, to surpass the state of mere survival in which your life is nothing but a leaf in the wind. And here I have to return to one of the meanings of Aristos, which is superior, and for me invokes Nietzsche's Übermensch. Of course, in Übermensch, Über means beyond, higher, or superior. Higher life, that is invigorated life, life full of health and energy, aims at the creation of supreme specimens. It always aims to overcome itself and to create something higher, to expend its energies. And the question of aims really is essential here. Life which aims at Aristos, at mastery, at excellence, at quality, at always creating higher forms and higher states of being, will create those things over time. The aristocratic way of life creates quality. Higher life would rather die than settle for anything else. It would rather die like Achilles than settle for a base life, an ugly life, a mundane life of domesticity, a life of imprisonment and slavery. In contrast, the moral, progressive, utopian worldview aims precisely at the creation of domesticated life, and if it does not, then it creates domesticated life as a byproduct. If one's goal is material prosperity and comfort, which Achilles scorned, the alleviation of suffering, the removal of resistance and struggle in life, one creates a form of life which is weak and lethargic, incapable at aiming at anything higher, incapable of overcoming itself. It is through harsh discipline and through testing ourselves against the world in the struggle to gain mastery over it, in the struggle to be the best, that we are able to manifest our inborn potential and powers. If Achilles had stayed at home, we would not remember him, and the full potential of his nature, of his divinity, would not have manifested. When a society seeks to level the hierarchies of nature, to negate the inequalities which allow us to compete, it removes the potential for excellence and the potential for the creation of higher states of life. One creates a society which is like a zoo, a society which imprisons rather than elevates. The result is sick life, life which, like many animals in captivity, refuses to reproduce, becomes addicted to food and masturbation, becomes restless and seeks to destroy itself or resigns to a state of apathy and lethargy. This is precisely what we see happening all around us at a societal level today in the West. Generation upon generation, we are breeding what Nietzsche called the last man. Since as of now, the ancient aristocratic worldview has absolutely zero political hold anywhere in the Western world, and is in fact almost universally considered to be evil by both left and right, it is up to us to preserve the aristocratic way of life, to preserve higher life, first within ourselves, and one day on a societal level. This is why I named this channel The Arc. The liberal worldview is collapsing as its ideology proves itself to be incorrect on a very, very fundamental level. Its assumptions are wrong, and with its collapse, the West will be launched into chaos. Just to briefly illustrate this, mass migration has failed to create a harmonious multicultural society and has in fact created the opposite. Our economic policies have failed and are hurtling the West towards economic collapse. The principles of liberalism have failed to defend our societies and their constitutions from its more aggressive, derivative ideologies on the left. To put it concisely, a flood is coming, like the earth has never seen before. But this also gives us one of the most supreme and meaningful tasks in history: to preserve and to rebuild, to be the founders of a new civilization, to give birth to a new type of man which is both of the pages of Homer and of the stars, to give birth to a new Aristos who shine with beauty, power, and nobility, to give birth to Nietzsche's Übermensch.